Picking up my bed, got khakis running everywhere.
All right, if I can have your attention, please. We've gotten the preliminaries out of the way. It's now time for the main event. Welcome to the Aspinall Annual Luncheon. First, I want to thank our sponsor for the luncheon, City of Greeley. And thank you very much. Let's give them a big hand. Next, we have Greg Hobbs to come up and give our invocation.
If we may bow our heads, please. For our dear friend Diane Hoppy, who is in the hospital, Aspinall Award winner, Donna Mann has gone to be with her. May we pray for her. And Lord, as we gather today in each other's good company to share the abundance of all gifts we receive, the food we eat, the water we drink, the conversation we generate through the labor and the fruit of the commitment of others. May the story of our lives continue to invigorate the Colorado we inherit, love, and bequeath. In the open space of opportunity, may we learn to practice grace and respect with self-correcting wit and humility in our slips and our falls, righting the wrongs we do unto others, and celebrating another chance to engage in what we may and what we will. Thank you, Lord.
Next, we have past Aspinall, our most recent Aspinall winner, Mr. Bill Trampy. Please welcome him.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I guess the first order of business for me this afternoon is to introduce past award winners, Aspinall Award winners. And I'm going to do it in chronological order, and hopefully I get this all proper. 1996, Hank Brown. 2000, John Porter. 2001, Larry Simpson. 2002, Dick Bratton. 2003 was Ray Kagosic, but I don't think Ray is here with us today. 2004, Ralph Curtis. 2005, Gail Norton. 2007, Lewis Ince. 'Justice Hobbs just mentioned Don Ament. He was our 2008 award winner. He was here a few minutes ago, but he left to go be with Diane. 2010, Alan Hamill. 2011, Eric Wilkinson. 2012, David Robbins. 2013, Diana Hoppy. And 2014, James Lockhead. During the past year and last few months, frankly, we have lost another of our prime Colorado water leaders, particularly from the Western Slope. And I'd like to ask John Porter to come and kind of say a few words in Fred Kroger's memory.
How many in this crowd knew Fred? You know, Fred was a real gentleman. He was a class act, and he was a water leader. Fred served on the Durango City Council's Water Commission for 60 years. He was, he served on the Water Congress. For 40 years, he was a board member of Southwest Water Conservation District. And for 28 of those years, he was its president. So he was a real water leader. He was the 6th Aspinall winner in 1986. And as I look at this august group that was just nominated, I owe my membership that to Fred. It was his articulate ability and his leadership that got me there, because I don't think I really belong with that group. So let's give Fred a hand.
Thank you, John. You know, John made the comment about he wondered why he belonged in this group. I feel the same way. I mean, I look out here around those two tables, and it's hard to believe that I am considered a part of them, simply because the next person I need to introduce is our luncheon speaker. And without further ado, I'm just going to make it simple. Senator Hank Brown.
Thank you. And thank you all for the privilege of sharing some thoughts with you today. You know, as I think about our lovely state and this marvelous place that we're privileged to live in, I cannot think of a single group of individuals that have done more to improve the environment of Colorado than this group. The reality is water storage and distribution has changed this state in a way that few ever thought were possible. And this group has done more for the environment than any group of souls that have pretended to make a difference in that area than anyone that I know of. A couple of us agree. Years ago, when I actually worked for a living, I lived in Greeley. I worked for Montfort. We were in the cattle business and meat packing. And I remember in the centennial year for Greeley, which was the centennial year for our state, in '76 we had a great celebration. And with Greeley being our sponsor for the lunch, it came to mind. I remember that celebration because we had a big parade through town, and in Greeley it's a community event, and just about everybody gets involved in the parade. And the local radio station, KFKA, had a reporter on the street getting public reaction as you went through it. And I remember so keenly some of the interviews he had. One particularly, he got a hold of an old fellow who was watching the parade near the stands, and he said, asked who his name. He said, Jan Svensson was his name. He said, how old are you? He said, I'm 99 years old. He said, oh my goodness. He said, where are you from? He said, I was born here in Greeley. I was the first settler's child born in the city of Greeley. He said, my goodness, I'll bet you've seen a lot of changes in Greeley in that time. He said, I have, and I've been against every damn one of them. You know, at times with water projects, it almost seems like we get more and more folks who are against every damn one of them. And I wanted to talk about that because I think the way we communicate what happens with water in Colorado is so essential for us to think about. And I want to get us started, I want to play a little game with you. The judge is not qualified for this. He's not allowed. He's too smart. But for the rest of you, if you would, as I give you clues, I want you to identify the piece of ground that I'm talking about. We're talking about selling a piece of ground. I'm going to give you clues, and as you think you've discovered what piece of ground we're talking about, if you would just raise your hand. And we'll just go quickly through them. First clue, it's 104,000 square miles. Nobody yet? The original price was 2.5 to 3 cents an acre. Nobody yet? In today's dollars, it was about 42 cents an acre if you adjust for inflation. Well, number 4, one of the early appraisers of this ground noted that no crops could grow west of the 100th meridian, and indeed this property is west of the 100th meridian. No takers yet? The far western portion of this ground is pretty rugged, and so we gave it to the Indians, to the Utes. But as soon as we saw how valuable it could be, we took most of it back. Many of the rivers in this property dry up in the winter. Not always, but occasionally. The ground is exceptionally dry, and one of the early appraisers of this property described it as a great American desert. Come on now, you ought to have your hands up now. One of the other appraisers, though, that gave a different view was one who described it as totally unfit for human habitation. What we're talking about is Colorado. What's changed? Were these folks simply biased in their reports? I don't know how many of you have seen it, but some of you, we've got some folks from Colorado Springs here, don't we? If you go to the Cheyenne Country Club, they have a photo in there of the area of the Cheyenne Country Club looking west towards where the Broadmoor is now. Only it was taken before the Broadmoor was built, or before where anything was built. And it looks like the backside of the moon. There is not a tree, there is not a shrub, there is not a bush, there is not a blade of grass. There's rocks, rocky soil. And today, I think most people would count that view, that magnificent view of looking towards the Broadmoor, as one of the most beautiful anywhere in the world. One of my favorite sites is Old Main on the CU campus. Obviously, there's a little bias at work there. I don't know how many of you enjoy old movies. I probably more than most. But there was a movie about Glenn Miller, and part of it was filmed on the Boulder campus. Glenn takes his future wife on a little stroll around the campus. They're near Old Main, and they cross the bridge going over Varsity Bridge. It's an absolutely gorgeous spot with old trees and grass and a beautiful lake and that marvelous bridge and Old Main and back. On the campus, we have a picture of Old Main shortly it was after completed. And it looks somewhat along that view that shows up in the movie that Jimmy Stewart and June Allison were in. Looks towards what was was Varsity Lake before Varsity Lake came. There Old Main sticks out this barren building standing straight up, and around it are no trees, no grass, no shrubs, in a visage that looks like the backside of the moon except for the lonely building of Old Main. And those of you who are from Fort Collins in northern Colorado are familiar with the circle around the administrative building on the CSU campus. It's exactly the same question when you look for the picture of what it was like before water storage. What's changed in Colorado that turned a semi-arid desert into a garden, that turned Weld County into one of the most productive counties in the nation in terms of farm production? What's changed is water storage. What's changed is not just the developments that took place in the way of new businesses and opportunities and jobs. What changed is we changed water storage. How do we change it? Pretty simple. 2/3 of our normal flow, actually a little more than that, come in 3 months of the year. It's what we call floods. The normal flow without water storage is more than 2/3 of our water flows down the rivers in the spring runoff in 3 months. And in the winter months, or the late fall and winter months, early winter months, About 1% of the average annual flow of our rivers is in the river. I want to repeat that because many of our friends express concerns about water storage in terms of minimum stream flow. Without water storage, many of our rivers used to dry up completely during the winter. And the long-term annual average is less than 1% of the annual flow in those 3 late fall, early winter months. What's changed? We changed the floods into controlled flows. And we changed the dry bed riverbeds in the winter into a minimum stream flow. What we've done is dramatically improve the environment of Colorado. And yet nobody knows because they didn't see Old Main before the trees and the grass and the water storage was there and the irrigation ditch was there. Well, when water storage is allowed, it's changed our state dramatically. So why is it so controversial? If water storage and water systems dramatically improve our environment in Colorado, why should anybody be against them? Why shouldn't we do far more? That's a tough question to answer, isn't it? Let me give you a try. I don't know if you remember the old story about the folks who had an elephant in a room, and they brought people in one by one, and they put blindfolds on them, and then they had them feel parts of the elephant, and afterwards they'd interview them, and they all came up with dramatically different descriptions depending on the portion of the animal they had an opportunity to explore. I think about our difference in views as human beings a little bit like that. Exploring the elephant is a little while exploring the world. We all have different experiences in life and different backgrounds and different teachers. Some of our families are fought on the north in the Civil War and some fought in the south. And believe me, the families still have differences of opinion. And some of us worked for a living and others spent their life in the Ivy League institutions. And they all come down with different views. And it doesn't mean people are bad because they disagree. It doesn't mean that one side's evil and one side's good. But it does mean they have different views of the elephant or different views of life that come from their experiences. Can people change a course? I remember, knowing my bias politically, you would guess George McGovern, who at least I always thought was on the more liberal fringe of American politics, and what a champion he was of federal regulation. I don't know how many of you heard George McGovern talk after he had left the Senate, after he had left politics, and decided to run a motel. He sounded like Ron Paul talking about federal regulations. This was a human being that had gone from one end to another based on his experiences. Well, I want you to visualize two people and the attitudes they have about water. One of them, let me describe as a Wayne Aspinall. And I don't mean to be presumptive, but as many of you had spent time with Wayne when he was alive, I had an opportunity to talk to him a little on a number of occasions. What a marvelous gentleman. What a tough soul and perseverance. If you think about it, Wayne's political career was concerned about jobs for people. He'd seen people struggle and have tough economic times, and he was dedicated to getting jobs and opportunity for people. He was aware of what happened in the 1800s when you had a severe drought, much more a difficult drought in the 1800s than we had in the 1930s here. He had read the descriptions of Colorado from the early explorers, and he knew them. Those words about no crops can grow west of the 100th meridian, and this is a great American desert, and it's unfit for human habitation, are not imaginative. They are what Colorado was described as before we had water storage. He was aware of the flood in Pueblo in the early 1920s and saw the incredible damage both to humans and to structures that it took place. He was aware of the flood in Denver in the early 60s and saw the damage that it was done and understood the need for additional water storage. In the 30s, he saw the horrible damage that occurred in the 1930s in terms of the drought. And those of you from northern Colorado can recall an area where people literally went hungry and saw their crops wither in the field because of that drought. It was the origin of the Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District. Out of that horrible experience grew a determination to make sure that that area had water when it needed it to finish their crops. And it changed, I think, as most of you know, a semi-arid desert, 12 inches of rain in Greeley on an annual average, 12 to 14, into the most, I guess the second most productive agricultural county in the nation, in one of the most beautiful gardens in the world. Take someone with that background and how do they view water storage? Well, the question answers itself. From their background, from their understanding, from their study, from their personal experience, from seeing a desert area go into a garden, from seeing floods, they're an advocate of water storage and they understand how good it is for humans as well as the environment. And take a second example. Now, just for discussion purposes, I'll refer our second example as William R. He's wealthy, rich, comes from a family, great affluence, so he's not too concerned about jobs like Wayne was. He's from San Francisco, where they have a lot more rain than they want or need, I guess except in recent years. Surely God couldn't be getting even with him. He's from a state that's overrun by growth. They don't want any more growth. They have too many people. They feel too crowded. And to top it all off, he has 3 degrees from an Ivy League school, a bachelor's from Yale, a JD degree from Harvard, and to cap it all off, a master's from Columbia degree in urban planning. This fellow is so smart, he doesn't need to listen to anybody. So what's his view of water? He's convinced that water storage causes growth. After all, isn't water an essential ingredient in new homes and new living space? So he's opposed to water storage. Well, William Riley has made an exceptional contribution to Colorado. For those of you who don't recall, he was the Environmental Protection Agency. Some have come to call it the Employment Prevention Agency, but I think it's the Environmental Protection Agency under George Bush. And he was the one that killed one of our major storage projects here a few years ago. I remember in the middle of George Bush's, H.W. Bush's term, 3 House members and myself asked to meet with William Riley when he had concerns about our water storage project in Colorado. What he used, the major piece of it was catching some of the drainage that went down the South Platte, where we deliver about a 500,000 acre feet of water a year over and above the interstate compact, water that belongs to us that we forfeit. This dam would have helped us save some of that water. He was reluctant to agree to any meeting, but because he'd expressed concern about our project, he finally agreed to it. He showed up about a half an hour late. He brought with him 2 bodyguards and a legal stenographer that he had set up before anyone is allowed to say anything. And then he advised us that the legal stenographer there was to provide a transcript for criminal prosecution if anyone said anything inappropriate to him. Well, this dear soul somehow sticks in my memory as we go forward. He was too smart to listen to a thing we had to say and ended up killing the project. I want to recall for you what William K. Riley's legacy is for Colorado. First of all, because he killed the project, thousands of acres of irrigated farms in northern Colorado have been dried up. That's his legacy. Hundreds of Coloradans have lost their job, not just in farming, but in processing and transportation as well, distribution. In addition, water that's needed for improving our environment has been lost downstream. added to the floods they occasionally have in the Mississippi drainage area. Minimum stream flow has been harmed because less of the water is being able to saved for use during the winter periods. And the portion of our water, of first use of our water, that goes to municipalities is lower than what it would have been. As you know, about half of our water is first used by municipalities for drinking water and other municipal uses, the other half not, by agriculture. But that portion that would be first used by cities has not gone up as it would have if the project had been done. But lastly, and most importantly, as part of William Riley's heritage and legacy for Colorado, is he didn't stop growth. You see, that was what he was all about. He was convinced in his own mind that the way to improve our environment in Colorado and in California is to stop growth. And he saw stopping water projects as a way to stop growth. And yet I think there can't be a single person in this room that could say that his actions stopped growth. As a matter of fact, Colorado's continue to grow. And that's what I want to share with you, the why. If we talk to the people who oppose water projects in Colorado, I believe what you'll find is almost every one of the environmental groups has that in their mind. They're aware that water is an essential element for growth in Colorado, and they want to stop it. And if the truth were known, I'll bet a big portion of us would kind of like to see fewer people in the state. Not the ones that provide my job, of course, but perhaps yours. Why isn't stopping water projects a way to stop growth in Colorado? Well, let's talk about that, because I think it's the key communication we have to get across. We have to have people understand what Colorado was like before we had water storage compared to what we have now. But most importantly, we have to have citizens of Colorado understand why it is stopping water projects won't stop growth. You know, there's a big bias there. I remember a time in the state legislature when we were told that stopping highways would stop growth. I always thought the folks who believed that hadn't had sex education in high school, but maybe that's a different question. 90 to 94% of our water usage, consumptive-wise, not first usage, but consumption-wise, is by agriculture. Let me repeat it. 90 to 94% of our consumptive use of water in Colorado is by agriculture, not by M&I, not by our cities. The consumptive use is overwhelmingly agriculture. If you stop a water project in terms of storage, you don't stop growth. Why? All you have to do is have the cities go out and buy agricultural water. They can always pay more for it than a farmer can, and convert it to municipal use. What we've seen in Colorado is not a slowdown in growth because we didn't have additional storage. What we've seen in Colorado is a loss of that water downstream in an increase of the amount of gray water that we turn towards municipal use. Should we conserve? Of course. Should we make better use of the runoff water we have? Yes. But the reality is, it doesn't stop growth. What it does is, one, make growth more costly. Two, it challenges the quality of water that we have for drinking. And three, it damages our environment. For all of you who love this state and love our fabulous environment, our challenge is pretty clear. Help our fellow citizens understand how vital it is to store the floods and use them for a beneficial purpose. Thank you.